Hello everyone, my name is Ryan and welcome back to Pro Game Reviews. In this video I will cover one of the games from the final round of the 2020 City League, which is between New York and Bay Area. So in this game was between myself and Mingjiu Jiang 7P. So it was a board 1 game, and this was played just last week. So typically after the final round, the players are selected to play in the US Go Congress. For the top 2 boards would play face-to-face for first place. Now this year, since Congress is canceled, I actually haven't heard about any updates for this, so hopefully we'll still get to play the finals in person. Now Bay Area has a very strong lineup. The board 1 is Mingjiu Jiang 7P, who is a very well-known Go teacher in the US. He has very, very strong students, one of them being Calvin's son, 1P, who was the 3rd ever AGA professional, who was actually before me. Mingjiu has definitely a very strong students. And Mingjiu has also been playing in many international tournaments, representing in, for example, Chunlan Cup, LG Cup, Tianfu Cup, and etc. So he's definitely a formidable opponent. Mingjiu also has been a very good teammate. I remember when we went to the first International Elite Mind Sports, it was also a team tournament, and Mingjiu was board 1, and I was board 2. And I can definitely remember during the dinner buffets, we would always sit together, and he would always tell us these stories about when he was playing and when China wasn't at all the strongest Go. So China wasn't very strong in Go. I shouldn't say like the strongest, because it's hard to say who's strong right now internationally. But back then, China was definitely on the weaker side, and at the time they still fought hard. And at the Mind Sports, of course, there was China, Korea, and Japan, who are really strong, and we were kind of unconfident, to say the least. So I know Mingjiu has been a good leader at the IMG. So you guys are probably looking at some photos of the IMG, and this one is between for the team the US team that went, and we had definitely a good time. So this was taken in 2016. There was another one in 2019, just last year, which I went as well, but unfortunately Mingjiu didn't have time to go. But yeah, I always enjoy these kind of longer format tournaments, because the more games you get to play, the more you get to learn. So without further ado, let's get right into this game. So I haven't played too much against Mingjiu before. I think maybe only 2 or 3 games. So I think this might be the 3rd game. So I was definitely had a mindset to learn from this game. So I was black in this game, and I decided to go with the large knight opening. So this opening is kind of less popular these days, I guess. More players like to play the star point now because people like to low approach. But of course this is also fine. So after this, I play the knight's move, which is all pretty normal, and then white plays the extension. So I guess this is all relatively normal, nothing too special. And then the 3/3 invasion, which is, you always start with corners in the opening, and then white takes the last corner. So the large knight is actually better for the lower side. So here white is actually putting more emphasis on the potential using these 3 stones at the moment. So after this, all 4 corners are pretty much taken, and I decided to take the the big point on the right side. So this not only expands black's influence here, but also puts some pressure on the 2 white stones. And because this is high, later there's going to be a more severe invasion. So then white does the extension. Now this move I personally wouldn't play because I think it's still relatively early, and I think the lower side is big because since black puts pressure on these 2 stones, if black were to gain something from attacking them, white would be able to take away the potential for black by playing a move here. And also I think maybe the top left corner would also be a potential option. But it's Mingjiu, so I can't say anything here. So here, I decided to get this move because for the same reason, if I were to attack this later, I may gain some influence, which would activate the potential here, and also would weaken these 3 stones. So here, white would need to answer, so white attached. Now, here I think the reason why white doesn't exchange the tiger's mouth, because normally you do need to exchange this before playing the double hane. However, in this case, white typically needs to spend another move in order to protect the future weakness. However, when black does the shoulder hit, white doesn't have any really follow-up moves here. Now, in the game, when white simply does the double hane, black can also double hane. So white just does a very simple way, just Atari and extend. So even though white still ends up in gote, but black has a lot of AGA here now with this stone. But if black just pushes, white will hane. So locally it's hard for black to actually continue because then it would help white develop this moil. So black still needs to play a reduction move because the left side is the most urgent right now. So white extends and then black jumps. Now, probably the most asked question that for like my Dan lectures is that where should white extend? Should white extend here or should white extend here? So other than it depends, I can probably tell you that if you don't want your opponent to escape right away, then you should extend here. Because, sorry, you should not extend here, because if you extend up top, black would either extend and jump. So this would help black get into the center. If you don't want black to take the side, then you shouldn't extend here, because extending here, black would either jump and extend, so it would help black extend to the side much better. And this is why you see for the small knight enclosure corner, when white always extend here, because early on you don't want black to have a move on the sides, so it's actually better for white to give black a stone in the center, because later on white can come back to take some territory. So it's harder for black to follow up locally. Whereas on the side, if you do this thing and ignore, when black plays the tiger stone, of course in here black doesn't have potential, but generally black can actually gain some territory. So there's a follow-up move to continue on the side. So I guess that's like my short explanation for what you should do for the center. So in this case, white continues because white doesn't want black to build any base on the left side. So white decided to wedge and connect. However, here I actually anticipated that white would play in a move to attack in the center. But in this game, Mingjiu actually played a move that's kind of not like Mingjiu, because he is typically more aggressive, and I would expect him to pressure me more for my group before clamping. The reason why I was happy to see this move is because after this move, black stones are relatively light. So in this case, it's actually difficult for white to launch an attack on the whole thing. For example, if black ignores and white attacks, then black can actually treat it more lightly. Probably not like this, but kind of as an example. For example, if white were to capture it like this, because white already spent a move on the inside, capturing this is not as big anymore. So this would give black more options. So in this game, I actually decided to tenuki and follow up here. So before I actually tell you guys where I played, I think this is actually a really good point in the game because the opening locations have been taken. So no matter what level you are, I think this can be useful for you. where should black play? Now, instead of just asking you just a plain question, let me actually put some options for you guys. So, should black play in the upper left corner, for example, approach? Or should black do an escaping move? Should black invade the right side? Or should black extend? So I'll give you the 4 options, and if you want, you can pause the video and think about that for a moment, and let me know the reason, okay? And then I will go over the answer. So for A, black is invading the upper left, which is a big point because it actually has to do with the corner. These are all relatively big moves. For B, it's protecting the weak group, so when white can't attack this and build the upper left. C is putting pressure on the two stones on the right, and D is protecting a big ladder weakness. For example, if white has a move here, white would be able to ladder the stone. So these are all really big moves, but which one do you think is the more urgent one? Now, I don't think there is a fixed right or wrong answer. So if you were able to spot these moves, you're probably doing quite well. Now, I personally think A is the correct response, because this move has I'll go over the reason for why this is more urgent, right? So we've definitely established. I think we can agree on the fact that these are all four ABCD are big moves. But the reason why this is urgent is because if you play any other one, so I think B is like a normal move, it's like a proper move. It's fixing the weak group, so I can't really say it's a bad move. But if you played C or D, it's not a bad move. But if white were to attack this, then white would be able to build naturally in the upper left. So I think for that reason, I think A is more urgent than C or D. So in this case, when black plays A, it's actually difficult for white to respond, because normally white would want to respond in the corner. But in here, when black plays this move, white stone is actually quite weak. It's not the strongest. And if white has to escape, then, for example, if black were to jump out into the center, black would be able to naturally connect these two groups. And that is going to be a very good strategy for black. So white actually can't just defend the corner, even though white really wants to save that territory. So in this case, white has to play the move in the center to keep putting pressure on these black stones. So of course, black would take the corner. So black makes this move. If white ataris here, then later on, if white connects or descends, then when black plays the one space extension, it's actually difficult for white to continue, because if white does this, it's gote. But if white doesn't, when black jumps out, it's actually very big, because this stone is, again, in kind of an awkward position. So in this case, white simply connected and let black take the nice shape. So black has settled on the upper left as well. So you can see here, after some moves, black has actually taken both of white's corners away. And so it's really up to white to somehow attack this. And in the game, Mingjiu played this move, which is actually quite a reserved move. And this actually really surprised me, because I actually felt relatively nice after getting this. But these moves actually kind of are conveying the information that white is feeling good about the game, because white is playing a relatively solid move as opposed to a move that looks for efficiency. So after confusing me, I actually played the invasion, and this actually was a mistake. And the reason why this is a mistake is actually because this is not even sente. Because if white ignores, it's difficult for black to take a good advantage of this move. So I think what I should have done was just simply jumped out in the center. There's still an attachment move to separate this stone, and right now the ladder doesn't work, so this is not super urgent still. And so I think this would be a relatively good game for black. At least I would be happy up to this point. So after the invasion, when white played this move, I was really scratching my head because I didn't even consider the fact that white would ignore this. But then after white did, and when I looked at this, I realized that there's nothing too good black can do. If black plays here, it doesn't completely capture the white stone, and plus white can still attach here to Sabaki with that stone. And not to mention, the middle is really urgent, it seems. Like if white adds another move, this is all going to be territory. If you compare these 5 stones, if you take them away, and let's say they all get captured, if you take away 5 white stones, white actually only spend 1 move on the side. So white's side is actually relatively efficient. So this is not very good for black. So black really needs to find a way to somehow not let these get captured. But of course, if you just do this, it's too dangerous. And even if black lives, getting a huge wall for white is really going to eliminate any potential for black for the rest of the board. So that's really not an option as well. So in the game, I decided to go with a very bold move, attach. The meaning of this move is that if white were to give up the right stone, it would actually be a competition because white would have a big territory, black would have a big territory. Even though black's territory is uncertain, but because black also has a stone here, white would still have to do a very proper judgment in order to give this up. Now, unfortunately, white just haunted here, so didn't really give much of a choice, but I realized that even after this, white still has this side is too efficient, and it's actually difficult for black to capture that stone. So that was really not the best idea. In the game, I decided to play the double honey instead. It looks like a relatively aggressive move, but it's actually quite flexible because white can Atari here. That will create some weaknesses. But if white gives it up like this, then it's much different because black shape is much better, and it's actually harder to escape that white stone now. So like this slight difference would actually matter quite a bit. So in the game, white can't just simply retreat. So white actually plays the Atari move, and then when black connects, white connected. So white Atari isn't connected, and now is actually a difficult situation for black. Now originally I wanted to Atari, but then I realized right before I played this move, I was just about to play it, but then I realized white can turn. And this is very awkward because even though black can spend another move to really save this, but it's really only to save some stones. There's no real value for black, but black is also losing quite a bit of territory because after white Ataris and playing the tigers now, the corner is only 2 points. And not to mention white has gained a lot of territory on both sides. So here black has a weak group, and white is just simply too strong. So it's going to be very difficult for white to actually gain any territory with all this potential on the right side. So because of those reasons, I decided to abandon this and actually come back to the right side. And if white turns, I was going to actually play this move and actually just sacrifice the corner. Because white has to spend another move, and right now getting each move is super important. So right now, black would be able to, for example, play a knight's move and really develop the potential. And I think that would be still a relatively even game. And black would definitely have the initiative because black is spending a move to attack these 2 white stones on all of the right side. So in the game, though, white didn't do that. So white actually just decided to double honey and take the territory. I think this is a pretty good move because actually black has a weakness here. So these 3 stones are still kind of right about to get captured. So white has actually most of the center. And I was feeling really worried about this point because normally if black just simply captures this, Then white would get the first move on the right side. White will be able to deal with white's weak stones. It's actually kind of hard for black to just simply enclose the whole territory on the upper right side. Since white has a huge territory here, I felt unhappy with what I did after the invasion and these moves here. So the good thing here is that I found a nice move, and it's this attachment. This attachment, I'm not going to go over all the complicated variations, but after the attachment and double hane, it's actually quite difficult for white to answer, and the main reason is because if white gives up the right side, black has all of a sudden developed a huge potential, and it's going to be very difficult for white to reduce this because of this move. So after enclosing the left side, black has actually made this q7 actually a reasonable move. So in terms of efficiency, this is really nice. It's a very nice result for black. So in the game, white chose to push out. And after this variation, white needs to save the rest of the territory, but then after jumping, black is able to cut off this group. So white is actually in a pretty dangerous situation after this. The good thing about this for white is that there's actually a potential weakness by attaching here. And I will get to that a bit later, so you'll see that in a bit, but that's an important place to keep in mind. So at this point I was feeling actually quite good, because after this not only black reduced the territory, but there's a weak group here which would also leave a good potential for black to use this move. However, right after getting a good result, I played a move that I quite regret, and I think this is a move that definitely could have been better. And I'll explain why this is a bad move, but after we look at what's the best move right now. So I want you guys to pause the video and think about this a little bit. If you were black, where you would play now. So compared to the first exercise that we did, this is more related to fighting and where is the vital point when you're in a fighting situation. So if you chose anywhere in this area to enclose white, you would have been correct. So right now the best move for black is to either jump or do a two-space jump, I think, to enclose this group, make white live, and then come over to the right side to attack these two white stones. That would be the best strategy right now. However, in the game, I played the turn, and I'll tell you why I did this. Actually, because of these three stones, and because of these AGA, after turning, the next extension is also Sente. So white still needs to respond, which makes the center much stronger. However, this is too slow because this is Gote, and right now we're in a fighting situation. Each move is super, super important. And so right after this, white pretty much played this immediately, and right then I realized that this is such a bad move. Because after white escapes, then all of these white stones are going to become much stronger naturally. So even though black gets this extension move, it really doesn't matter because white is much stronger, so white can actually jump over to put pressure on this group. And not to mention that these two stones are in a much better situation, so it's much harder for black to attack these now. So just a slight shift in strength and weakness in the center could really matter in this kind of game because the right side is so unsettled that really anything could change it, right? Because all that potential, whether it could turn into territory or it can all be destroyed, it really depends on how strong the black and white groups are. So now these two stones are stronger. It's going to be a much harder game for black. So in this case, I decided on something big. So I spent some time to think. Luckily, I played quite fast in the opening, so I had some time to decide here. and I decided to play a very bold move, again, is to enclose the upper right. Because here, when black jumps, black can actually stop white from going in. But there's a lot of AGA there, so that takes quite a bit of courage. But I decided to jump here. When white jumps, I decided to jump again. So this is sente, because if white plays in the middle here, when black pushes through here, this stone is also very weak, and also these stones on the left side. So white needs to spend another move here to connect this. And it's actually quite hard to attack this whole white group, because there's a lot of weaknesses for black's shape as well. Not to mention, this stone is really not looking good right now. But after this, the good thing is black is able to jump over here. And this is turning point 2 of the game. And this move is also quite risky because there's so much AGA in the upper right. So I think the motive of this move is quite obvious. Black is just saying, I need to enclose all the upper right. And I'm going to test you and see how much you can reduce. And I think I still don't fully know what the best move for white is. I think really it's going to really take some time to actually figure that out. But what I can say is it's actually quite difficult for white to actually do something big. So it's going to take quite a lot of reading. So for one, white can't really do anything directly. So if white Ataris, black can extend. And if white captures, black will block. So even though there looks like there's a ko here, but it's also quite risky for white. And also black might be able to extend, because if black can still enclose all of this, white gets gote, and black can come over to attach or to take the endgame on the left. So it could be a possible trade for black to just sacrifice these stones. If black can get this, that would be even better. But so this ko is definitely something, but it's not anything too major at the moment. The second place for AGA is this move. So after this, black has to push and cut. And so the reason why white has to play this directly is because if white pushes and panes, black would extend, because then black can still protect the cut this way. So this is also possible. So to make it more direct, white can just play the knight's move directly, which forces black to do this. So here, white can actually capture the 3 stones in sente. But that doesn't actually hurt the upper right, so white can't really do this directly as well. The third big point of AGA is probably just the corner, like the 3-3 attachment. Now that I think about it, I actually don't know what I'm going to do if white actually just attaches. I think maybe that's what white should do. It's actually quite hard to respond to. If black just hanes, then, for example, if white cuts, that's going to activate a lot of AGA here, which would help white explore this coming on the inside. So luckily at this point, my opponent didn't have much time left. So Mingjiu was in Byoyomi already. So this, if you didn't know, the City League actually uses the Canadian style Byoyomi, which is I think it was, is it 30 or 20 moves? I think, is it 25 moves? Oh, I can't believe I don't remember. But I think it's something like 25 or 20 moves for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. This is embarrassing. But anyway, it's actually quite fast. I think it comes out to about 30 seconds per move. But you actually get to allocate the time yourself. So at this point, white has only 10 minutes to play 25 or 30 moves. And I still have some free time. And so I think in terms of like time-wise, this is a good strategy, because by playing here, I put a lot of pressure on white. So white can't ignore this, because if black just adds a move, then if all the AGA is gone, this is such an efficient, like 1/4 of the board. So this is definitely not acceptable. So white needs to do something right away, and that puts a lot of pressure on white. So in the game, white plays exploits this first, and then white didn't capture. White decided to push here. So both of these are sente moves. White now needs to do something, and that something is not quite. It's not definitely not obvious. And in the game, white decided to attach and block. So since white was in time pressure and I wasn't, so I really had the advantage to spend some 10 minutes to think about this. And I realized that I can actually just Kosumi, and there's nothing too much white can do. And even after white extends, when black extends, there's actually no way for white to capture the 3 stones. And even after this move being sente, the closest white could get is the Kosumi here, but black can also Kosumi. And still, black can just escape, which means white has lost out in this battle here. So if you think about all it took for both players to get to this stage, I mean, if all the moves beforehand were part of the story, this has to be like the one nail that hit it, right? It's right. It's the thing. It's definitely the decider, right? If you played all the moves here up to this point, you can imagine 2 players being kind of similar in strength, playing on the whole board similar moves, right? Really, it's just one local reading result that really decides the game. I think that's really something that would be worth thinking about. So here, white wasn't able to get this, but white was still able to, under some time pressure, do some attachments here. So here I decided not to respond there, because the more moves I play, there's going to be more forcing moves for white, not to mention there's this weakness here. So after these exchanges, after white pushed and haned, white was able to get something here. So this is a good move. And black can't ladder because after the Atari, white can hane. So black needed to come back to this side. So then after some exchanges, white was able to find a weakness. However, that's not enough because white actually lost a lot here. After connecting in sente, that's about 7 points already. And not to mention some moves played inside the territory. So black can now just sacrifice the right side and take sente. And after black takes sente, black can come over here to attach. So first I exchange 1 move before attaching. And then after this, because black still secured most of the territory in the upper right, is bigger than the left side. Black can use all the territory advantage in the beginning to secure the lead. So after this, there are just 2 big endgames left. One is the lower right, and one is the lower left. But at this point, there's not too much fighting to be done. So here, white actually tried to do something here, and which is a really good Tsuji. After the attaching, after Atari, white can actually push under. So this is a nice, I think it's called a squeeze Tsuji. Because after the Atari, white can Atari on this side, and black has to extend and extend, and then when white connects, white has another first line sente as well. Unfortunately, after this exchanges, even though it's a nice Tsuji, there's 2 really big endgames, and black would automatically get one of them. One is this right side, and one is this hane here. And so since black will get either one, black will continue to have the territory lead until all the way to the end. So after this, white is forced to take this, and then black comes over to hane. So here white actually can't block, but if white doesn't block, white would end up in gote. So in the game, white decided to block. So white actually has some really comfortable sente moves here to force black. Now the ko here wouldn't work because there's too many local ko threats, so white doesn't have enough ko threats to start it. So here after that, white decided to actually sacrifice this to take sente, so black captures it, and that will lead up to the end. So after some more endgame moves, I was able to finally secure the win. So I think this game was actually quite interesting. I was pressured many times during the game because of some questionable moves. For example, my invasion on the right side, and also my attachment may be questionable as well. But there were still some good moves. For example, the attachment in the center I was happy with. So definitely a question was the turn. It was really a bad place to continue during a fight. But I think I really appreciated this part of the game where like it was kind of like a bet, you know. It's kind of like seeing whether white can do anything. And I think this is the part of Go that I really began to appreciate as I play more and more, because really it's how you can hone your skills in terms of outreading your opponent in the end. And as much time strategy you can use, but you still have to read everything behind this. And one slight mistake is really just going to decide the outcome. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope you guys enjoy the commentary, and I hope you guys can learn something from really making the choices during the game. And if you got both of the questions correct, leave a comment as well. So if you enjoyed, please feel free to drop a like. Always appreciate those. Next time, as promised, I will cover the Trinlan Prelim Finals. I hope you guys aren't bored that these are all my games, because really, during COVID, there's not too many pro games to select from. So with that, I will end it here. Thank you all for watching. My name is Ryan, and I will see you next time.